Record. Okay, recording is in progress. So,
Okay.
yeah, good evening, Jeremy. Nice to have you here on Zoom. Um, yeah, we wanted to talk about your record flight in the Kerio. And yeah, just to start off, thank you for making the time. And uh, maybe you start by introducing yourself, and I'll just ask questions as we go along.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for having me, Veit, and thank you for welcoming me to Kenya back in January. It was a time of my life, and of course, uh, mission accomplished. I set out with a vague ambition of breaking the world record, but I had no idea if it'd be possible. There were so many unknown unknowns, but we got there on the third attempt. Third flight, should I say, first attempt, first time visiting Kenya, first time in sub-Saharan Africa. About me, I am 30 years old. I've been flying since I was 17, since I got my driving license. First thing I did once I could drive, I drove to the nearest hang gliding school, and that was down in Cornwall. I learnt on the dunes and winches. Um, I got into it because I've always wanted to be an astronaut, um, but I was always afraid of heights growing up. Having grown up in a bungalow, I'd get really scared going onto the first floor of a building, or second floor if you're American. Um, I vowed to overcome my fear of heights, and the best way of doing that was to get airborne, and the cheapest way of getting airborne was to jump off a cliff. Originally, it was wingsuiting that captured my imagination because all you need is just a squirrel suit and a suitably high cliff. And I was watching all these YouTube videos of guys wingsuiting, but then I ran out of videos because they were dying quicker than they were producing videos, um, which was unfortunate. And then the YouTube algorithm said if you enjoyed wingsuiting, maybe you would enjoy hang gliding. So that was that. I did enjoy what I I like the look of it. The first time I ever saw a hang glider was the first time I clipped into one at the hang gliding school. I'd never seen one in the flesh before. Um, but from that first hop, I was hooked.
Nice, man. Really cool. Really cool. Very nice. Um, yeah, and then what was your hang gliding career as you started with your 17? Did you were you in that generation where they no you were no you weren't in that generation, but there was a generation a Gen X generation where um there were pilots who were building their own aircrafts, their own hang gliders. Did you ever think about building your own machine?
Sure did. Yep. A first generation pilot, so no one in my family had done it or anything. And then as soon as I got my license, I actually went to university, and I found that I couldn't store my hang glider at uni because it was a 10-meter wingspan folds down to a 5 meter long package, and my room was only 3 meters long. So I decided I was going to design and build a telescopic hang glider for my master's project. And with that in mind, while I was studying engineering, I did aerospace and mechanical engineering specialized, in order that I could learn all the skills I needed to design and build something that could pack down small enough to either fit inside my dormitory or to go inside my really small car, a Toyota Yaris. It's 2 meters long on the inside. So that's what I did. When I got to fourth year, starting my master's project, the uni was strongly against the idea. They were convinced that I was going to end up killing myself if I ever did build anything, and that would bring bad press to them. So they tried to veto it, and none of the aerospace professors um, would supervise my project. I took it to the mechanical engineering department, and none of them would touch it with a barge pole either. In the end, I persuaded a professor in the civil engineering department, who usually specialized in things like soil mechanics, to sign off on my project. And the understanding there was he needed to have students. He had a quota to fulfill, And although he could tell me nothing about aircraft design, if I just got on and did it and presented to him as fait accompli at the end of the year, he would sign off on it if I didn't take up too much of his time. So I went and built it at home because I had more tools and facilities there. They wouldn't let me use the workshop. They didn't like the idea of me taking up 18 square meters and building something that they hadn't condoned in the uni workshops. But I persevered and started with a pretty clean sheet design. I didn't want to be just shoehorned down the route of existing hang gliders. But then I was constrained by the sail, because although I could manufacture a pretty radical frame, I'm not a seamstress, and I didn't really trust my domestic sewing machine to make an entire sail from scratch. So I was constrained to modify the sail off my existing glider, and modify it I did. But that meant that the plan form had to be roughly within existing hang glider designs, although the frame ended up being pretty innovative. The tubes all telescoped inside themselves. There had been previous short pack versions where you end up with a big bundle of short bits of aluminium, but that doesn't really make it any more portable. Whereas I wanted something that had a much smaller stowed volume, whereby each of the bits of the frame would slide inside the next one, so that you ended up with a small package. It didn't weigh any less, but it was considerably less voluminous. The idea being that I could not only put it in the car, but maybe carry it on my back and take gondolas, ski lifts, to go and take off from the tops of ski resorts, and generally go places that you can't with a 5 meter long package on your back. And I ended up test flying it, jumping off a 200-meter sea cliff. And spoiler alert, I'm still here today. So that proved
Wow.
my maths and first principles engineering worked.
Oh, wow. So wait. So was the aircraft lighter than the original one? Like
It was
your
no lighter, because you end up with quite a lot of overlap in the telescopic sections, and I didn't have the budget to experiment with composites, so it was aluminium. Um, However, it was a lot smaller. If you bear with, I can bring up a picture of the.
please do. Please do. So for those who just came on, Jeremy was just describing he studied aeronautical engineering, and his first or one of his first projects was to build a hang glider. Yeah, which he then test flew, and he actually survived. That's incredible. That must have been like a dream come true, huh?
Yeah, can you see my screen now?
Oh wow. Okay.
So on the left, you can see it. It looks a bit like a cello. If I wandered around town, they just think I was carrying a cello on my back. It's 2 meters long. It fitted perfectly inside the Toyota Yaris, and then it folds out to the normal 10 meters. The main innovations that I think are actually worth carrying forward into hang glider design is the spanwise zip. Because I wanted the sail to roll up or fold up, preferably without having to take all the battens out. You see, what with it being short packed, inevitably it's going to take a little bit longer to rig and de-rig. So to mitigate that, I wanted to leave the battens in, to speed up the process, which meant I angled them to be perpendicular to the leading edge instead of chordwise, so that you could unzip the sail on the bottom surface along the length of the span, and then flip it around up on top, so that you've no longer got a doubly curved tube. You just have a flat sail, and then you can roll it or concertina it, and it ends up in a small package. So there were some good elements of the design that I think are worth including in the evolution of hang gliders. Of course, the performance wasn't great. That's mainly because I'd had to modify an existing sail, and with anything with any new design, you expect a few iterations before it starts performing
Oh,
well. But it handled lovely, neutrally spirally stable, and I managed to top land it on my first test flight um, after 2 hours in the air, putting it through its
wow,
paces.
wow, wow, wow. Gosh, 2 hours in the air, and you did it all on the sewing machine, or you had somebody sew it for you? Uh,
Well, you can see that yellow strip on the trailing edge.
yeah.
Um, I got that sewn at P&M Microlight manufacturers, the guys that made the Quick GT and things like that. Um, they also sponsored me with a few bits of tube and the Dacron, the yellow bits.
Okay.
But for other modifications, like to the leading edge and things, I did that on my my home sewing machine that I
Oh,
usually
wow.
use to patch my socks and things. I use nylon thread, so it is waterproof and
Okay.
pretty strong.
And then one other question, I'll ask others to maybe if they have questions. This rucksack type thing, I've seen it in the paragliding in cross country magazine. They actually use it to go cross country, like to climb mountains. They have these very high bags, these 1.5 meter bags, and then they go hiking and they put their thing together. Did you actually commercialize it, or did you like the Soper dot tech? Did you think about
Um,
developing it into something?
well, it had crossed my mind, but obviously, if you're optimizing for portability, then the paraglider already exists, and no matter how foldable or telescopic you make a hang glider, it will never be as light and portable and convenient as a paraglider. So, given that the market for hang gliders is already tiny, the market for ultra portable hang gliders is an infinitesimal fraction of a already small number. Therefore, it didn't really make much sense to try and launch another hang glider manufacturer into a tiny market. I did, however, try and spin it off by starting a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft company. I graduated in 2018, and that was right in the middle of the hype wave around VTOL air taxis. So I thought I'd have a go too, given that the hang glider represents one of the best strength to weight ratios for aircraft, and it's also a pretty cheap way of making a single seat demonstrator. So I set about modifying the wing and adding a trike, and then generally creating an airframe that could take vertical lift motors as well as a horizontal cruise powertrain. And that's what I was doing until I got distracted by asteroid mining and ended up moving to London as the first salaried asteroid miner in Britain.
Oh, well. Okay. Do you have a picture of that vertical takeoff, or just a design? Because I don't think you
Yeah,
tested that before.
I got as far as doing conventional horizontal takeoff and landing tests. There you can see in the middle, it's essentially a flex wing microlight, but using that ultra portable wing that I'd made, and then a super lightweight trike that had to be really stripped down to its bare bones in order to release enough payload fraction for the additional motors. And then the additional motors um, were going on all of the corners that you can see in the middle picture.
Okay.
So the cross tubes, which would normally be inside the sail, and then pointing forwards in the same direction as the leading edges, I reversed them and put them out the back. So they still had the same function. They still were the main compression members keeping the wings apart. But by flipping the direction, it was able to provide a bit more, um, more convenient locations for the motors to attach to.
Okay.
And then there were also two little prongs sticking out the front where the motors at the front would attach, and that doubled as a well additional crumple zone, which I
But
used on more than one occasion.
just this is not this goes completely away from the topic. I'm just curious. So those battens that are sticking out on the leading edge, um, though they should have they 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 were going to have vertical motors on them or what? Like
Yes.
facing
Yep.
downwards.
Yep.
So then you would basically all of a sudden stop flying. Like you wouldn't use the aircraft aerodynamically, but then just come down vertically. Is that
Yes. The idea for this single seat demonstrator is that it was going to be two separate um, systems. So the paramotor, tandem paramotor there providing the horizontal cruise, and then electric BLDC motors providing the vertical lift and lower. So it would just lift it up 50 feet or whatever you need it to be to clear the surrounding obstacles, and then you just perform a basically normal horizontal takeoff, except you're already 50 feet up in the air. And then similarly for landing, you would gradually slow down and just imagine that you're landing up in the air before kicking in the horizontal, the vertical motors, bleeding off your airspeed until you're zero, and then you come down the final bit.
oh, well, that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. Wow.
But
And
then
then when
the other
yeah,
startup that I've been involved with got funded around about the time I was completing the horizontal tests, and then I went and joined that full time.
okay. And now you're doing okay because we'll just touch on that. So now you've created a company or you're working for a company that is doing asteroid mining.
That was back in 2021. I had
Okay.
been involved with it for 3 years at that point, and we'd been pre-capital, not getting anywhere with getting our space telescope mission funded. And then all of a sudden, we got funded to develop hexapedal walking robots for microgravity that would take core samples on the asteroids when we eventually got there, as well as
Oh,
perform infrastructure inspection on Earth in the nearer term.
okay. Sorry, this is way. Is not. This has nothing to do with hang gliding or paragliding or anything with free flying. Can you share a picture of your hexapedal vehicle or your mining?
Yeah. Um, let's see.
Gosh, and that the vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that should really be developed further because that
Um,
would.
well, yeah, I'd still like one as a run around as a toy. But I think COVID showed us that we don't necessarily need to get from A to B as quickly as we thought we did. In fact, you can do quite a lot more from home. So perhaps the economic viability of VTOL aircraft isn't as strong as it used to be. It's definitely technically feasible, but whether it's economically viable is another matter.
I think you've just given Acacia's dad, who likes tinkering with things, a great idea. I'm going to go visit him and we're going to work on that idea because he has a trike hang glider here in Nairobi,
Oh
so
yeah,
it would be an interesting project. Oh my God, that looks like out of
it was not meant to look like a spider. It only has 6 legs, more like a crab, with feet that can grip onto the variegated surface of either asteroids or mine shafts and things. Um,
and you
yeah,
built it. Is it like is or you
it
developed
did
it?
get built. It did get built. Yes.
Okay,
This, as you might be able to tell, is on the Wayback Machine because the company sadly is no more. But the robot, I believe, is still kicking around somewhere in Japan.
cool. Okay,
And yeah,
yeah,
most recently, I've been building self-driving tractors and
okay.
starting a humanoid robotics company. But we digress.
Yeah, but okay, as this is all being recorded, we need to see some pictures of the robotic tractors, the self-driving tractors, and the humanoid. Do you have anything that you're developing or you're working on?
Yeah, we are at CSU Technologies. We have made a retrofit kit that you can install on any hydraulically driven tractor or indeed any hydraulically driven vehicle. And paired with our RTK network, which is the cheapest multinational RTK network in the world, you can bring auto steer to older vehicles that don't come with it built in.
Oh wow.
5 times less than the price of getting it on a new model.
Because there are these combined harvesters that are fully automatic and stuff like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. New vehicles do tend to come with it built in, but even then, it's a very expensive subscription. So we've had more than one customer who's bought a brand new machine with it built in come to us and just turn off the built-in version because ours is substantially cheaper.
Oh,
Um, and we've designed and built that in-house. The hardware, the software is the Ag Open open source
okay,
GUI that runs on the tablet.
okay. Wow, that's interesting. Well, we won't get into that. I've got thousands of questions about that. And the the humanoid the
The
humanoid.
humanoid robot, that's still under wraps.
Okay,
Have to
okay,
wait a few months before we come out of stealth.
okay. Wow. Well, I hope I hope you share some pictures on the group then. This is a follow-up.
We'll do.
Okay, so let's go. Let's dive into your record flight. No, not even that. Let's first talk about what made it motivated you to come to Kenya. Like, what was the yeah, what was the spark?
Oh,
Or because sorry, I'm just gonna tell. I was reading a month before in the cross country magazine that there was some competition going on between pilots about the distance records and stuff like that, and you were also mentioned. Was there some motivation to become first because others had beaten you or something like that? Was that?
um, I I don't subscribe to XC Mag, so I don't. I'm not aware of the article that you mentioned there. Um, I suppose I'd started in 2013 hang gliding, then and gone to uni and hadn't done a massive amount of flying because I was at uni in Cambridge, which is very flat. Occasionally, I'd escape and go to the seaside and float around on the dunes there. But generally, I was only flying during the holidays, largely coastal. It was many, many years before I accidentally blundered into a thermal, and that was in the Alps. I ended up going to the Alps every summer as a rite of passage, well, sort of, yeah, annual pilgrimage, because much bigger things to jump off there. Um, but I hadn't done any competitions until 2018. My first comp was the Kazakh Hang Gliding Open. I'd done a crash course in Russian and flown out to Kazakhstan, partly motivated by the fact that at the time the only way to get into space was in the Soyuz capsule, so you had to learn a bit of Russian if you wanted to be an astronaut, and also because being half Chinese and half English, perhaps I've always had a little bit of a crisis of identity. People in England say I don't look English, and people in China don't think I'm from China either. And I looked at halfway between um, or Shanghai and Taunton on the map, and it's pretty much Kazakhstan. Um, so I thought if I go to Kazakhstan, maybe people will look like me there. Um, and then I discovered there was a hang gliding competition, so off I went. Um, and that was my first taste of comps. It was a good way of ensuring you got a retrieve, because well, by then I'd been flopping over the back of my local hills and finding that it takes a long time to hitch back Not much hitching, mainly hiking around our parts. There's not too much traffic, whereas competitions provided a retrieve, and that made flying further a bit easier. Over the course of the next few years, I was flying further and further, and then I hatched on the idea of joining up the length of the Alps from Monaco to Trieste in a contiguous, unbroken series of track logs, because well, the main Alpine divide is really beautiful stuff, and to get up onto it doesn't happen every day, maybe only a few times a year, but it's an incredible experience, and I wanted to see how many of the Alps I could join up. Well, preferably all of them, from one end to the other. You paragliders have got the X Alps, but for hang gliding, there's no equivalent. So I called it the Flex Alps. And the last few summers, I've been gradually closing the gaps, ticking off each section, not in any particular order. The order doesn't matter. I'm now 83% of the way through.
Wow.
And then last Easter, while I was out there, there was a really big day forecast. In fact, it turned out to be the biggest day ever, May the 1st, biggest day on X contest in history. And I set myself, I'd done 200-kilometer flights by then. In fact, I'd done a 200-kilometer out and return in the Pinzgau Valley before. And I set myself the task of doing 300. With most of my tasks, it's a long shot. I didn't really, I wouldn't have put money on completing it, but you gotta aim high anyway. I ended up flying past sunset, and I didn't realize it until later, but I came within a few kilometers of, well, equaling the world out and return record. So that gave me the idea that maybe I wasn't so far off the pace needed to set a record. And I started taking it a bit more seriously then, and looking at options for where there's a big enough ridge and enough daylight and enough thermals to have a serious crack at it. And that's when I discovered the paragliders had been having a great time out in Kerio.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
So I called Veit, and here we are.
Yeah, great, man. Yeah, so just for everybody to, does anybody have questions until now? Please feel free. Okay, well, just for everybody. We worked together, Jeremy and and I organized him transport, and his hang glider is actually in my garage, hanging in my garage. Yeah, and that was a great success. And then just for others to explain to others, a hang glider is a different aircraft to a paraglider. You need more time to set up. You need to have it's more heavy, and then also you need a bigger runway for landing, for takeoff and for landing. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, I went. Jeremy got in contact with TT, a world champion tandem paraglider, and they found a spot out in Nyaru. I went to look at it and everything, and that worked really well. That actually happened. They cut some trees and stuff. Yeah.
I was very impressed with the the go-getting attitude of the locals. When we turned up and discovered that the trees were a little bit too high, I thought, well, it could be a few days before we can get these shifted. But our driver just asked the lady who was who lives in the house adjacent to the takeoff field, would it be possible to cut these trees? She made a phone call and said the guys will be here in 10 minutes with the chainsaw. So amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Back home, that would it would take years. You'd have to do a bat survey. You'd have to get planning permission. You'd have to talk to like the parish council, and then they'd find the trees have got some ancient bylaw protecting them because they're inhabited by spirits, and it would just never happen. We're losing lots of sites because of trees. One of the sites near home is just unflyable now because the trees have come up in front of takeoff from the sides as well, and you're not allowed to touch them.
Oh
So
gosh.
yeah, we were really lucky that Nyaru was perfect, because to set the FAI world record, you have to be at one end of the at and return. You can't just take off at E10 in the middle and then tag the southern turn point and the northern turn point. You have to start at one end or the other. Anything that you do beyond your starting point doesn't count, as it were. So it had to be somewhere near Niaru or at the other end, but there's nowhere suitable at the northern end because it's no longer a cliff, and it's also not as convenient for habitation.
Okay. Okay, and then describe your record flight. Like it was it was a declared uh, record, right? So how did you first plan it? How did you or what? Just explain how, yeah, how how you planned it and
It's
how it works.
two records: the declared out and return and free out and return distance. The declared means that you've just set the turn point at the far end and you have to fly to within 400 meters of it. And then the free is just whatever you end up doing on the day. But both of them you have to start and finish within a 400-meter radius of a start cylinder. That's not necessarily the same as your takeoff cylinder. But if, for instance, I did take off at E10, then I'd have to fly 40 kilometers to the start cylinder, and then at the end of the day, I'd have done an extra 40k. So taking off at E10 wasn't really an option.
Mm.
Because when trying to set a record, you are just racing against the length of the day, the daylight. So you want to be as close to your starting cylinder as possible. And of course, you need the full length of the day, which means you can't wait for the thermals to start. You have to find somewhere where the ridge lift will keep you up first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And Nyaru is perfect for that, because as soon as the sun peaks above the horizon, the wind generally picks up. And then by the time I got to E10, that's when the thermals would kick in most days around 8:30ish.
Mm.
And then it's more conventional flying through the middle of the day. And then once you get back to, well, ideally you'd get back to E10 before the thermals stop and run the ridge all the way back, but it didn't always work out like that. The end of the day was a lot less predictable.
Okay. Okay. And so you fly around. You were flying around for 9 to 10 hours, right?
The
You
record
also have
was 10 and a half hours in the end. Yeah.
yeah, and so you have a P tube. So you have that like those paragliders. You have some, or you just
And
weed out your harness, or you just.
yeah, no need for a P tube. We're already facing down. So
Oh, no
all you got
way.
to do is unzip. And then you got to dig around, because if you've been up at height and it's got cold, then things have shrunk and they're not always that easy to find. But no, I've got pretty proficient at peeing on the wing, because I do lots of long flights, and you got to be fully hydrated when you take off, which means for the first 4 or 5 hours you're peeing quite regularly, and then after midday I tended to go from busting for a pee to severely dehydrated because I don't carry any
Oh,
means of hydration in flight. Um, I probably should next time. That's definitely worth looking into. But historically, when I've tried camelbacks back at home and in the Alps, when you get up to altitude, they freeze, and then you come down again, they thaw, and then the freeze thaw causes them to rupture. Then the next time you go up, it leaks out on you. It freezes all over your back, and then you're just covered in lumps of ice, and it's not very pleasant.
Gosh,
Um,
gosh.
so I'd never got on with them. I just got used to chugging as much as I can before I take off, 2 or 3 liters, and then hoping that lasts me for the rest of the day, which it does to around the 5-6 hour mark. But what with it being especially hot and dry in Kenya, I was very, very dehydrated on the first few days until I got into the habit of a liquid breakfast.
Oh, but can't you just carry like a water bottle, like, and then just uh,
No,
uh
it,
grab in the
it'd be
back of
very.
your pocket somewhere? Do you have pockets? Like, can
We
you
we
that?
do,
Yeah.
but a bottle like that in a pocket, you'd probably end up fumbling it and dropping it.
Okay.
It's not very easy to do. I'd have to think of a way of tying it on with a lanyard, um, and it's not very easy to fly one-handed. Well,
Oh,
it's easy enough to fly one-handed. It's not very easy to fly zero-handed. So whenever you need two hands to do anything, you'd lose control for a little bit.
oh gosh. So what happens if you let go? You go into a nosedive or what? Or
No, you'll be all right for a few seconds. It's stable to first order, but then the second order perturbations will kick in, and you'll be in a spiral dive before too long.
okay, okay, okay. Well, then
For,
let's dive.
for
Yeah.
peeing, you just park it in a thermal one-handed, and then that's the most stable configuration to do it in. Trying to pee while on glide is really tricky because on glide you have to keep correcting to keep it straight.
Wow. And okay, the technicality, do you like spray it all over your harness? Like at the end of the vacation, everything is smelly or
No, no, because it's descending and you're going up.
okay,
Well, okay, you're going down through the air still, but you hope that it's sinking faster than you.
okay, 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 good. Yeah, too much information. Okay, please, I'd love to see the X contest track, and then maybe you can even your altitudes,
Yeah,
because we saw you flying over Kilima Resort, I think
yeah.
a few times, and you were quite high, and you were just soaring, but you were already much higher than we would ever get at that time of day. That's incredible.
Um, so on the day, I took off as usual, and just went up and up and up on the first leg. So out to the turn point, just past the end of the ridge, and then cruising along. Every day when I got to here just past takeoff, a magpie would join me. And this was really
Oh,
special. It was the same magpie every time, just checking me out, escorting me to the edge of its territory. And it would surf my tip vortices right on the edge of my wingtip. It would fly up and then dive and fly up and dive. And we had a great time together. But on this occasion, he had to work hard to get up to my altitude because I was doing quite well early on. Um, and of course, you're already taking off at 2,700 meters, which is the air is noticeably thinner when you're a little magpie. So I went along past Chororgit to where the ridge starts facing northeast. Hadn't I'd just been continuously gaining height, so now we're at 3,000 meters as we round this corner.
and what time is
Um,
it? It's like
that's
oh,
eight
eight
forty
o'clock. Wow. Okay.
eight, yeah, 10 past 8. Motoring along here, hopped over the waterfall gap, and now at 8:24, we're starting the Iten Ridge. Haven't turned yet, apart from the 180 at the other end. Um, I was losing a little bit of height here. That's normal. Um, Possibly because first thing in the morning where you've only got light ridge lift. It's not quite as steep there when you've got the plateau breaking up the bulk movement. So this is where I would meet the paragliders coming from Iten, and they would usually be a bit lower because for that reason the ridge lift isn't super strong on those cliffs, and I'm carrying my height over from the narrow section. But I'd learned from the first day where I got a bit worried. I was losing height, and I thought if I just continue losing height at this rate, I'll be having to land on the plateau. I was really scared of landing on the plateau because landing at high altitude on a hang glider is much more difficult. You notice every 500 meters or so further up, you're coming in a lot hotter. And the plateau is not the flattest places either. It'd be downsloping in the windward direction. So I really wanted to avoid landing on that. And the cliffs at Kerio View and Kalima, well, from Kalima, if you don't get any height on takeoff, you can glide out over the lip and get down to the bottom of the valley. But from Kerio View, it's questionable whether you could glide out without gaining any height. And I'd been there and recce'd it from the ground, and I thought if I am ever flying along and I get as low as takeoff and I'm not going up, I'm not maintaining, then I might be in trouble. So on the first day, I'd bailed out when I started sinking and flopped onto the main ridge, or the ridge out in front, and I'd got away with it. The second day, when I flopped onto that one, I was too early, and there were no thermals, and I decked it just past it 10. But the third day, I thought I will hold my nerve, and even if I'm sinking lower, I will trust that as I get closer to the cliff, there will be still enough ridge lift to keep me up, and that was also what TT recommended. He said just tuck in real close, and you'll be all right, and that proved to be the case.
Uh,
So
just
I
just just go back that section where there's that corner lip. Yeah, did you feel any weird headwind or
the
just
bit
no,
behind Hill 10, you mean?
no, after
Or
E10, so farther north, just in this section, then
yep.
when you come around that corner, just before that, in this section, did you get any, was it all smooth sailing or
You can see here I start gaining altitude there again. So I was a little bit apprehensive of this section, which is 45 degrees out of wind, but that turned out to be unfounded because I started regaining height here, and you're also getting closer to the lip. So the option to bail returns. No, that day it was that day was one of the stronger days, if not the strongest day, and most paragliders did not stay up for very long. Yeah, Andre and Lucas were there at
mm,
the beginning of the day, but then bagged it because they thought it was getting quite strong. But for me, that was ideal because there was guaranteed ridge lift. I didn't need to worry about it getting too light to stay up along here. On subsequent days where it got lighter, my confidence increased, and I did stick on the ridge even though I was getting quite low, lower than the point at which I'd have been able to glide out. But I just kept pushing until I got around the corner, and it worked.
okay.
The take home is that the ridge provides some of the days where I was lower than the let's say the wake pattern kicked up by Hill 10, I would go out in front of it, or at least stay directly ahead of it, rather than taking the direct line because I didn't want to get in the rotor
Mm,
there. But on on the record day, I was so high as to not be concerned by it at this point. Then around the corner, kept going, did a little 180 here just for security. Didn't have the confidence of later days yet. So I was doing some unnecessary little wiggles, and even putting a 360 here. Just to, perhaps I felt that maybe the thermals were starting. This is 9 o'clock now. And another little one here, but generally no turning until whatever you call this bit at the very end of the escarpment, where it turns into a more conventional ridge. And there's my first thermal at 9:14. From there on, I went pretty slowly, as in I wasn't pulling in and gliding aggressively. I was just boating along, knowing that there would be something, but they weren't super strong that time of the morning, so the speed to fly isn't very high.
Actually, the speed is like 54, 60. The ground speed is huge.
Well,
66.
not really.
Okay.
In
Oh, okay.
in a competition, you'd be gliding at 70, 80, 75-ish. And on a cracking day in the Alps, you might be gliding at 85, 90 if you're in a hurry and you know that you can make it to the next peak. Whereas this was quite leisurely, very leisurely morning boat at 10 o'clock. I didn't want the embarrassment of going down like I had the day before. That was probably a big decider in my pace at this stage. A little bit tricky to see what's the outbound leg and what's the inbound, but no surprises running along here. Nicely easterly drift, and then at this corner you always end up with a little bit of southerly as the air escapes the Kerio and wraps around the corner, and then it can get a little bit funky, as some of you will know, where the wind is coming up these valleys from the north, but then meeting the air sneaking around the corner from the south, so you can have thermals pinging off in any direction on these promontories. But there is still the bulk flow due easterly at height if you connect with a good one. So I hopped onto this one, didn't run it all the way along to Mount Co before taking it back to the westerly most ridge of the Tarangani hills, and then got a nice long glide over the gorge at Sigor, where there is quite a Venturi draw through there, so I usually lost a fair bit of height. You can see on the altitude track there, I do drop a bit like a brick. But once you're on this ridge, you know that you can keep running along it until you hit a strong one, and that was a very strong one. That 10, there you go, 10.3
Wow.
meters per second. At that point, I think that one averaged 7.5 meters up, and I gained. I went from 2,200 to about 3,600 in one hit.
Yeah, it looks like a vertical line, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then off I go. On the first day, I summited Mount Montello, which was fun, but I didn't need to do it this time. I'd done my sightseeing on the first day, so now I was just on a mission. All this time, I'd not really been keeping up with the pacer that I'd set myself. I had in the back of my mind the speed I needed to be going at to close 360, based on what I'd seen the previous 2 days, which is the day shutting down really early. So I was trying to get back in by 4 o'clock, and I wasn't at that pace, but I thought I'd keep going anyway. There's no point bagging it early. You can still learn a lot just by flying the task, even if you don't complete it.
So
Um,
what was
but
your average speed goal? Like what was it, 60 or
no, I wanted to do ideally 40 kilometers an hour. And then absolute slowest I wanted to do was 36 because that would take 10 hours to do 360 kilometers. And I didn't really think I'd had 10 hours because taking off at what 7:30 that would take me through to 5:30, and the previous 2 days it had shut down way before then. So yeah, ideally 40 kilometers an hour, and at this point I think I was down to maybe 35 average. Um, but there were some nice clouds beginning to pop. You got to keep the faith that the sky will develop because you don't know until around midday whether it will happen or not. But um, yeah, the weather prediction is fairly low granularity in that region, and you just have to hope really. Now I was getting a bit of tailwind helping me along here over the well this ridge that sticks out north from Mount Montello. And now I could see the Turquoise Reservoir. I could see my turn point, which is just near the dam at the end of the ridge. So I felt confident about getting the turn point. But this now strong tailwind was slightly concerning. It was good for getting there, but I knew my work would be cut out on the way back. So I
Mhm.
glided along here.
You had, wait, there was 100 kilometers an hour you had. Yeah, so that was okay. That was quite
Oh yeah,
fast, huh?
yeah. So I did.
Wow. Wow. Do you have any pictures by any chance of that? Or did you or how do you even take pictures if with your phone, or do you keep your phone in your pocket, or
I've
how
got a
does that?
motorbike camera that does a time lapse every minute it takes a shot,
Oh,
and I attach that to either my keel or my wing. On the record day, it died after 100 pictures, um, and they were pretty much the same as the day before. So I only uploaded the one first thing in the morning, showing the orographic because that was something new and interesting. But I'll bring up the shots from the other days where I did manage to get pictures down the far end because the far end is really something. Um,
so did you by any chance see any paragliders on your track? Because it's quite big, right? It's a huge area. Do you see anybody out there? Any colorful wings?
on that day, no one went down the far end, um, but on other days we can do the air buddies and show them side by side. Let's see where the interesting photos begin. You're all familiar with the southern end, so I won't show you those. Um, how's that?
Good. That's
This is Mount Tello, the highest peak en route. It's pretty featureless, actually. Well, I don't mean that in a denigrating way. It's just um, when I see a how high is it? 3,336 meter high mountain. It's usually covered in ice and rocks, whereas this one looks just like a little local hill with a bit of greenery, shrubs, grass on top. Nothing too severe or drastic. But it's a great vantage point. There's the rim that you've got to skirt along. The next peak up ahead is not as high, but it's still quite prominent. So if you run the rim of that ridge, as I did on the first day, you end up in the lee of the secondary peak. So the best tactic is still just to cross in a straight line and stay upwind of the second peak. But sometimes you just want to run along a ridge because it's fun. This is rounding the corner. Now we can see Turkwell up ahead, a little bit hazy. Should still be just about visible there. This section can get a little, well, it can get windy. Yeah, the further north you go, the stronger the wind in general. I think because it's not as high as the Kerio, so it's easier for the bulk wind to sneak up onto the plateau that way instead of going up the Kerio. It gets drier and more inhospitable. Landing options for a hang glider are pretty slim down here. Looks like it'll be flat, which it is, but the tree spacing is just annoyingly slightly too small, which means that my options from this point are I've got to try and get to the airstrip near Loricon, or I'm ending up in the riverbed down there, which isn't great because they've got some large rocks and it's not very straight. And landing on the road's pointing the wrong way.
Yeah, well, that's as close as you can get as being an astronaut. You're like on this alien planet. You can imagine that for a moment when you're out there, huh?
Yeah. There's the airstrip. So now I'm feeling a little bit more calm because I can see a landing option, but I am getting a bit low. The clouds down here, sometimes they look really good and they are just not quite as good as they look. This is the last day of January where I was trying for 400 kilometers, and I'd opted not to. Well, the 360 record takes you to the very end of the ridge, just by the Turkwell Dam. To get 400, yes, the ridge does continue. I don't know if there's a better picture showing the ridge. The ridge does continue, obviously. However, the road does not continue. And the turn point that's at 200 kilometers out there is a good 30 plus kilometers from the road. The road leaves the ridge and heads off towards Lake Turkana at that point. And a 30-kilometer glide would be possible from, well, 3 kilometers above the ground. But if you're just above the ridge at that point, then there's no way you're getting out to that road. And the land is slopey. And there's no guarantee that I would get retrieved. So I might be doing a 30, 35 kilometer walk, which is why for the 400 kilometer turn point, I stuck it out in the flats and had to hope that there would be a cloud street leading me out to it when I got there. And there sort of was, but the clouds didn't really work that day. I tried 3 without any success, and I got low at Nakwamoru. Almost thought I was going to land there, which wouldn't have been the end of the world because that is a village. But there's a bit of beef between Turkana and West Pokot counties, as I discovered on the previous occasion, and was escorted out by armed police.
Gosh.
Another story. Oh, and then there's massive dust devils in this part of the world. At home, we'd probably call them tornadoes. They're that big. So if you pick a landing spot and you start heading towards it, and then suddenly a dusty springs up there, then you're probably going to be toast.
Gosh, yeah. And then just a question. When you were landing out, you had a few outlandings, right?
Yeah.
Uh, how long does it take for you to pack your gear together, like into the?
It takes me, well, if I'm really hurrying, I can get it packed away in 20 minutes.
Okay, okay, it's not a big.
Um, but I I usually found that no matter how remote you are, even if you think you've landed in the absolute middle of nowhere, before I have a chance to even get unclipped, there will be a crowd surrounding me. So there's absolutely no chance of packing up before anyone notices you've landed. It's always a public spectacle in Kenya, as as I'm sure you know. So you can't really get away with just landing out and then hiding yourself. Back home,
And how?
I pack up and stash the glider in a bush before, well, hitching back to the car, and then I'll come out and get it. And yeah, you will never see anyone, but out here, even right out in the sticks, there'll be loads and loads of friendly faces come to say hi when you're down.
And how long did the retrieve take then to get back
It
to
took,
civilization with the car?
yeah,
Was
it
it
took
like,
all of that day for them to come and get me, and then all of the next day to get back.
oh,
Because well, with the out and return, they can't just set off chasing me because in an ideal scenario, I'll end up flying back to takeoff. Um, they don't want to drive halfway there and then drive halfway back. So what they usually did was go and park at Iten and wait for further updates, which meant when I ended up down at Loricon, they had to drive from Iten, and that took, well, it was dark by the time they got there.
what? Then you spent the night there and then you drove back the next day, or did you?
We spent the night in Kapangaria
Okay,
and drove back the next day. Yeah,
okay,
we did that twice.
okay. Gosh, it's now 1 hour. Um, the flight back on your record flight, did you have challenges in the evening, like to get to your declared goal?
Yeah. Well, okay. The record day, I can still show you the same pictures, um, because it usually looks the same. Um, on the way back, let's revert to the next contest. Actually, um, okay. I tagged the turn point near the dam. This is weird here. I went back to the exact same spot trying to pick up the same thermal, and I ended up getting a thermal at maybe 30, 40 degrees off compared to the one only a few minutes before. So even with a strong meteo wind, it's not consistent. Um, this one was actually slightly advantageous. It wasn't so southerly as the one before. Um, but no, it became apparent that I was into quite a strong headwind on the way back. Um, and then here I was getting, well, going a long way without much of a nibble. I picked something up here. That was I was very grateful for that, but that wasn't enough to get me back up to base. And then this one was dragging me back towards the north, rounding this headland. I was getting a little bit low.
Slow, man. You're really slow as well.
Yeah. But then finally, whoomph, up I went again, back up to 3,500 meters. That section, yeah, it was not looking good if it was going to be like that all the way. That was quite rough there as well, I seem to recall,
For, tho-
and a general concern about the lack of landing options.
for those who don't know that. area is called the fingers because of those ridge. If you zoom out, yeah,
But
it's quite.
I thought this was the
Oh,
fingers at
oh my God, you flew beyond the fingers.
yeah, this is
Okay,
the next fingers. This is the
okay.
Orwa. Um,
The next
they're
fingers. Okay,
not as fingery,
okay.
but the air can be mixed and rough here because it's coming around that corner. Um, However, at this point, now that I'm back on the in the Sigor Valley, I can see some lovely cloud streets popping across the flats. So I thought I would try and cut the corner off because I didn't want to be going upwind behind the fingers here. So I thought if I can run the cloud street in a nice straight line, I can head all the way to Tot in well, in the flats instead of having to mix it with the ridges. So that's what I attempted. I went along here, um, not losing. Well, yeah, I was losing height, um, but not too severely. Um, I should add the first day it
Whoa.
worked really well. The first day I did manage to run along and cut the corner off, and that worked wonderfully. But no, on the third day, the record day, it did not go according to plan. So I ended up groveling low at Sigor, where there are plenty of fields here to land. But I thought I'd overcooked it then. However, I
917. Yeah, you were very low, huh?
yeah,
Gosh, so,
but that one saved my ass, and I got back up from 1500 to 3800 in one hit, and then we're back in the game. But I had to contend with the fingers then on the upwind leg. By staying on the most northerly bits of it, the fingernails, I got away with it, and it wasn't too bad. You can see there is some confusion of wind direction. Even that was north northeast, then east, and then north northeast in quick succession. Um, but I was making pretty good time, even though it had been upwind, because I suppose cut a little bit of the corner off. We're still in with a chance here. We're back on the main ridge just after 3 o'clock, and now there's a northerly wind pushing us towards home. And the day is still young. There wasn't the shading that there had been on the first day.
yeah, speed, yeah.
And off we go. We're shooting along, but I did fall off the ridge at this point, and then because it was a northerly, yeah, the ridge wasn't as buoyant and lifting. The air was kind of sliding along it instead of going up it. So I did need to scoop one up out of the valley bottom here until I could drift back onto
Okay.
the ridge, which I did as quickly as possible. And then I was just trying to stay high, float along, go with the wind. And at the very end of the day, there's what I call the after party. The sky just belches forth its last energy, and the cloud base is nice and high, and you can work the remaining lift until the sun goes down, which I did, and I still had a bit of height. So I went and tagged a little further south, but that doesn't count towards the official record because that wasn't the starting point, although it does count towards X contest. And then I went and landed down, or I'd put in the Kerio Valley Airport as my landing field, based on this map and what I'd seen on Google Earth. But when I went looking for it, I couldn't find it. It was nothing that looked like an airport at all. So I ended up going for this field, which was fine. No, I can conclude the airport hasn't been used as such for a little while.
Okay. That's great, man. Congratulations again, man. That's
Thank you.
amazing. Yeah. So we have it on record.
Yeah. And I'm sure there will be, well, not lots, but a number of people might be interested in following my footsteps to try and break a world record, or at least their personal record, in the Kerio with hang gliders. And 400 is definitely up for grabs because, well, I did get to the 200-kilometer turn point, and if the day had lasted as long as it had on that third day, then I could have made it because I was on the numbers for 400 on the last day of January. It's just the wind wasn't as the meteo wind wasn't as strong, so the cloud line at the very end of the day ended up being in the valley and not on the ridge, which meant that the convergence brought a little bit of a tailwind on the ridge instead of the headwind that you need to give you that puff to get in when the thermals have died. It's definitely possible. You just need to be there on the right day, and you don't know it's going to be the right day because the forecasting isn't accurate enough. So you just have to take off as soon after dawn as possible, fly the day, and hope that when you get back, it is the day. And if you haven't, then if it isn't, you'll have flown 10 hours and got really tired, and it will be too knackered to fly the next day. But I managed to maintain a cadence of flying every other day, and that was just about sustainable for a couple of weeks, which gives you, well, 8 bites of the cherry in my case.
Mhm. Amazing. And just I haven't checked your X contest, but like your personal bests, like just
Yeah.
to wrap it up, like your personal best you had at other sites, how much did you beat your personal best with that flight, like from other sites?
Um,
Oh, that's a giant leap then. Well,
it's considerably further. I'd done one flight over 300 before that, and then in that 1 week I did 273, 377, 287, 333, 361. It just blows anywhere else out the water really for consistency of massive distance. Um, Last summer, where are we? 307 from Stoderzinken. 307 closed, but that was 351 if you include the little tail that I stuck on it at the end. So this was the flight that inspired me to attempt the record, because I got pretty close without realizing it. Um, and maybe 400 would even be possible there on the right day.
mm,
Um, but you don't get the consistency. You can't just turn up day after day after day and do the same thing, fly the same task, and improve, because that's a once in a year opportunity, or 2 or 3 times a year in the Alps, whereas the Kerio is
they're quite consistent.
incredibly generous. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's be mindful of the time. Um, I am I just thousand thanks for uh yeah, just this whole webinar.
Thank you
Um,
for having me.
yeah.
Any questions?
Oh, yeah, any questions?
How did I plan for rescue? I used rescue.co with at Veit's recommendation. Didn't have to use them in anger. My retrieve team is very slick, and it's not Dad's first time coordinating my retrieve, so he's used to all the shenanigans that I put him through. It certainly the tech's getting better. we were in contact with a WhatsApp call through my Bluetooth headset. We arranged that he would call every 20 minutes or so, and then it would pick up hands-free, and I'd just give him a sit rep. He was also tracking me on Live Track 24. And as a backup, I had a Garmin InReach Messenger if I landed out of signal. But as it turned out, it was 5G wherever I landed. There's no running water, no infrastructure, no roads down in the bottom of the rift, but there is 5G. Whereas at home in Somerset, there isn't even 3G. It's and the flight that I did on Saturday across the middle of England, my first flight since getting back from Kenya, couldn't call for the whole flight. We were just out of comms, so he didn't know where I was until I'd landed. But that wasn't an issue in the Kerio. Hydration and snacking. As I said, the hydration needs improvement because I don't have the means to hydrate in flight or snack. Some pilots are better at that than me. I've seen one guy has 3D printed a lunchbox for his base bar so that he can tuck into bratwurst in the sky. I've not quite, well, my 3D printer is not good enough for that, for starters. And maybe my landings aren't good enough either, and I'd end up smashing my lunchbox each time. So I'd just pack a few things in my harness and tuck into them when I landed. However, when I landed out at Sigor down the far end, and then I was mobbed by a load of bow and arrow wielding school children who were herding their cows, I thought it would perhaps be prudent to share my food with them before they trained their bows and arrows on me. So I proposed an archery competition, and the winner would get the food. I ended up losing my survival rations to a 3-year-old who proved to be much better at archery.
Wow. What were they, like big bows and arrows, or?
Yeah, the bows were taller than them, and the arrows had proper metal tips on them. They didn't have any flights. They probably hadn't caught any birds of prey recently, but it would have still done a fair bit of damage if I'd pissed them off.
Gosh.
And the kids further north in the contested borderlands between West Pokot and Turkana, they were carrying AKs, and they have to fend off the cattle rustlers. My driver was a little bit scared about picking me up from there.
Imagine, right? Gosh. Are there any more questions?
How does it compare to what Andre's experience was? I never actually got to meet him on the ground. We were flying together quite regularly. But what did he make of it? Was his experience more different?
We had him on last week, but the internet was bad from his side, so we had to stop. We had to cancel. Yeah, I'd love to hear his story. Yeah.
For sure, I'll be back next year to have another crack because, as you said, my glider's still there.
Yeah.
They couldn't ship it back in yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, Jeremy, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And we've recorded this, so we're going to publish this on our webpage. And yeah, hope to see you next year then. And we can stay in contact with your humanoid robot and your inventions.
Definitely.
Right.
Cheers, guys.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.